So let's talk about some of the new faces and new places in the NBA. There was obviously a lot of moving and shaking going on in the offseason, and some people landed on their feet, others didn't. We got 5 guys that we're going to discuss here today to kind of talk about how they did. We'll grade them at the end here.
Yeah, we ain't talking about the burger joint either.
Nah. I don't know why that tickled me, but yeah,
who do we got first?
We'll start off with DeMar DeRozan in Sacramento.
Okay. 25 points a game, Jerry. It's looking pretty good so far. Yeah, I mean, when they signed him this offseason, DeMar DeRozan is he's 35 years old, 34, 35 years old. Talking about aging like fine wine, this guy can score 20 points a game in his sleep. Mid-range king. He's been great for the Kings, man. 25 points per game, like I mentioned. It just really doesn't seem like he's aging at all. No matter what team he goes on, I feel like he could help them out a lot. And so far, that Kings offense looks really lethal, looks really good. They have a lot of options there. So, yeah, I think he's off to a great start there.
Yeah, I'll do nothing but co-sign that, man. I think at this point now, a lot of the old head NBA stars, at least of the 2010s past, look like guys that are just perfect plug-and-play players. And no matter where you put them at, they're going to find a way to be effective. They're going to get to their spots. They're going to be able to be productive. So DeMar stepping into Sacramento's situation, that's the veteran that maybe they needed come January, come February, whenever the season gets a little thicker. And we're starting to see what teams are going to end up where, or like we talked about in episode 63 of our podcast, like you guys should probably watch, that there's going to be a lot of little to no separation in between these teams. So players like DeMar can make the biggest difference for his team. So I'm also on the vibe for that. That's actually pretty great.
They're 6-5 right now, 10 seed, but only 2 games out of the number 1 seed. That's how close it is in the West. If you had to give a grade here, Jerry, because we're going to be giving grades for the performance, what would you give DeMar DeRozan?
I'm going to give DeMar an A. This wasn't a move I was exactly high on because it's Sacramento and they got a star player, the former star player that might not have too much in the tank, but he shut me up. I'm glad that he's doing well. So I give it an A. I like it.
All right. Well, let's move on to our next player, Jerry. Let's go for Karl-Anthony Towns in the New York Knicks. Obviously, we know he was unexpectedly traded before the season started, averaging 24 points, 12 rebounds a game in New York, Jerry. What are you seeing out of Cat in New York?
Super great offensive player. Probably in terms of offensive scoring productivity, I think he's probably the one, especially with Joel Embiid having, his issues early on. And of course, Jokic is Jokic, but Karl-Anthony Towns is probably the best shooting big man, and he's kind of opened up the Knicks offense to some degree. But the defensive side of the ball has been pretty putrid, and I don't think he's looked that well. I heard that he's giving up 32 for 35 attempts in the paint, which is over 90% for a team that was a Tom Thibodeau-led team that was number 1 in defensive efficiency at some point last year. So little disappointed.
Well, that's what happens when you bring in a non-defensive center in, unfortunately. Indeed. So you get the offensive side of things, which is great, but defense is that's what lacks. But yeah, I mean, like the Knicks, they're off to a slower start. I mean, not even just Cat. They made a lot of moves this offseason. So they're still kind of gelling, putting things together. They're 5-5 in the East. But I mean, I've mentioned many times in the past, like if the Knicks needed a center, like they needed a true center, especially after getting Bridges and kind of wondering what the roster was going to look like if Randall was going to be the starting center. And I said in some universe, Karl-Anthony Towns would be the perfect Knick, and it's this universe. I think that he is off to a good start. I think he's putting up all-star numbers, and eventually this will it'll figure itself out. But I'm probably going to give this I'd probably give it like a B+ because of the defense. I'm going to keep it down from an A because of the defense.
Yeah, that seems fair. I'll slide down to a B. I think a B seems comfortable for me. I'm not really too high, but moving on. Grades for another player for another day. Moving on to Klay Thompson here, who's also having a pretty solid impact with his new team in the Dallas Mavericks, averaging 14.5 points per game and also shooting well over 37% from deep, which is pretty similar to what he did for his last year in Golden State. But what are we thinking out of Klay Thompson here with his new team?
I think he's given the Dallas Mavericks what they need and also what we expected from him. He's averaging 15 points a game, which is down from his 18 points a game last season. But I mean, it's kind of a given where he is, how old is he? Where's his age here? Where's his age? He's in his he's 34. So about to turn 35 this season. So he's getting older. He's playing next to guys like Kyrie and Luka, so he's not going to be getting a ton of shots. When he's getting shots, it's going to be, a Luka Kyrie ball in their hands, finding an open Clay, wide open shooter, or something like that. So you're not going to see a lot of him creating his own shot, like with those two ball handlers around him. So, but 14 points a game, the shooting, like you mentioned, he's doing what he has to do. This team needed shooting. He's providing shooting. The Mavericks aren't taking the world by storm here. They're not exactly off to the hottest start since, their last NBA Finals appearance, but I'll give it a B. I'll give it a B because like he's helping, but it's not like, to me, it's not like a needle mover. Not quite yet, at least.
Yeah, I'll give it the same thing. It's more so I need to wait and see. Four-time NBA champ leaving the system that he knows for all his life. It's a
Take
whole different
time. At the end of
offense.
the season, he could look like a whole new player, and he could look like
The,
a
the
superstar.
gravity of Kyrie and Luka will eventually show its worth for what it can do for a guy like Clay. So a B for now. Very,
Okay.
very like above average for me.
All right. Well, let's stick to another guard another guard out west. Klay Thompson might play forward now, kind of however you want to look at it. But guard out in San Antonio, Chris Paul, averaging 10 and a half points, 8.5 assists, playing alongside Victor Wembanyama. Now, signing Chris Paul was a great signing for the Spurs because you give Wemby a veteran point guard, you give this young group a vet to work with. A lot of these young guards, they have him there mentoring them. That's great value to have off the court, on and off the court. They're 5-6, which is honestly not terrible because they getting Chris Paul, it's like big name, whatever. He is 39, and they really still are very young and not meant to be good. So I don't think we should have had high expectations record wise for them. But 10-8 as a 39-year-old, it's not the worst. Not the worst, Jerry. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think he's doing what he was brought in to do, which is more so mentor the guys and be that extension of, the coach on the floor, but I feel like he's doing that. Devin Vassell played in his first game of the season recently. He looked good.
Great.
Yeah, going to mentor Stephon Castle here and obviously be a big plus for how guard pick and roll should be ran when you have a 7'5" freak like Wemby. So I'm giving Chris Paul an A+ here, man. I mean, you weren't brought in to help this team win a championship. You were brought in to mentor these guys. And as of early on, like looking at some of the, random clips on Twitter and also watching the games, and now he's interacting with guys during timeouts and after timeouts on the floor. He's barking up the right tree, I think. So A+ for Chris Paul, man. It's a mentorship program at this point in his career.
Yeah, I was going to put him at an A just because, again, the expectations for this, they shouldn't have been high for anyone. No one should have expected playoff berth, championships, nothing. Playoff berth, that's something to definitely shoot for and a good goal to have. But you take Wembanyama off this team pre-Chris Paul, this team's one of the worst teams in the NBA.
Easily.
So it's just you have to have those expectations and realize you added a 39-year-old point guard and you have a blossoming 7'4" monster freak. But everyone else is still putting it together, and the rest of the team isn't as great as you may think. So I'll give him an A.
Gotcha. Well, on from our 1 point guard to our last point guard here on the list, Tyus Jones, who hopped into the Phoenix train after leaving Washington, which is just a weird place for everybody to be at for a random year.
To be there.
But averaging 10.7 points and 6 assists, but the most impressive stat, which I lost, so don't be mad at me. But okay, here we go. Only one turnover a game, which is hey man, you're out there moving the rock. You're playing with Devin Booker and Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal. You're doing your job, taking care of the basketball, hitting an open three when you got
shooting 41% from 3-2, 54% from the field. Good percentages.
I'm all for Tyus Jones. I love the fact that he decided to land in a place where he could actually just play his natural position and actually take a starting role. So I love Tyus Jones here, but what are you thinking?
He passed up some money this offseason. He said that he had some other bigger contracts from these lesser, smaller teams, but he decided to go to Phoenix because they needed a point guard like him, and he's fit in super well. Obviously Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, those are the big name players, even like a Yusuf Nurkic, you can say. Grayson Allen led the league in 3-point percentage last year, I believe. So there's talent there, but they needed a point guard. And we've talked about this before. They needed a playmaker, facilitator. Devin Booker's gotten better at playmaking, but you need a true point general. And although his numbers aren't like, 10-6 is not like, that's good. I'm not trying to say it's bad, but like the numbers don't stand out a lot, but his impact on that team is like, they're the number one seed in the West right now. You can tell, like, again, Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Bradley Beal are there, but I think Tyus Jones kind of being the starting point guard has been a big reason why they have been so good to start, and why I think that they're one of the best teams in the NBA, period.
What's the
so
grade?
For that,
what's the grade looking like?
I'm going to give out my, I think this is the first and only A+ I'm giving out.
Okay. I'm also going to give I'm not as harsh of a grader as Dante, so I've been handing out A's, man. I'm a fun teacher, but I'm gonna give him an A as well. I think just being able to set the table for star caliber players is not an easy job, but it looks like they're loving it. They're feasting it. Mike Budenholzer's job is probably a lot easier with Ty, so gonna give him an A here. I love it.